Today's gospel reading comes out of the 4th chapter of Matthew, verses 12 to 23. And in today's gospel reading, Jesus begins selecting his 12 apostles, men who will be the building blocks of his church. And in today's gospel reading, Jesus acquires 4 out of the 12. The subsequent 8 will be told in future gospel readings. Now, as Jesus is laying the foundation of his church, he realizes 2 things at the same time. His church is able to do an incredible amount of good things, but at the same time, his church will be stuck in a quagmire of problems. And there's a reason for it, and it's scriptural. Let's take a look at the very first section we want to look at is verse 18 to 20, 4th chapter of Matthew. It says, as he was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and his brother Andrew. Casting a net into the sea, they were fishermen. Now Jesus, said to them, come after me, and I'll make you fish men. At once they left their nets and followed him. You see, at that very point, Jesus picks 2 of his apostles, Simon, who was also known as Peter, and Andrew. 2 great selections. Now, the important selection about Simon, who was called Peter, it would be he that would be the first pope of the Catholic Church. Now, Jesus is going to acquire 2 more apostles. Let's take a look, verse 21 and 22. Again, 4th chapter of Matthew. He, again Jesus, 3rd person singular, he walked along from there and saw 2 other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He, Jesus, called them. And immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. Now at this point in time, picked up 4 out of his 12 apostles. And Jesus realizes that with every selection, these 4 and the other 8, there's going to be a problem. Oh, they were really good men. There's going to be a problem. And what would the problem be? Does anyone have an idea? Well, let me give you a little hint. Because it's with this hint and the answer to the hint, we're going to discover what the problem's going to be in his church. Jesus is going to build his church on what? Using what? What's he using here? People, exactly right. He's using human beings. Human beings just like all of us. And human beings carry with them good things and bad things, good baggage and bad baggage. Let's take a look at one thing every human being carries. Let's take a look. All human beings are imperfect. They're all flawed. You see, Jesus had to say to himself, I want a church that's going to be perfect, but that can't happen. Because I'm going to build my church using human beings. They're flawed, they're imperfect. Therefore, my church is going to be riddled with problems. A lot of good, but it'll be saturated with problems. You see, every human institution on the face of this earth from the beginning of time has had problems. Any organization, any group run by human beings will be able to do a lot of good, but at the same time will have a lot of problems. From the dynasties in China to the emperors of Japan, the czars of Russia, the presidents of the United States, and everything in between, always a problem. Why? Because they're run by human beings who are flawed and imperfect. It should never shock you when you open up the newspaper or listen to the radio and there's a negative story about the church. You should just simply sit back and say, well, I know why. Because it's run by human beings. The shock is to run across someone who is shocked. How could you be shocked? Don't you know that they're run by human beings? Everything's run by human beings. So there's setbacks and negative to every organization, every society, every institution, every government, every church, every school, every fire hall, every VFW, every organization will have good, a lot of good, but also its share of problems because it's run by human beings. Now, Jesus realized you got to do what in this world? You got to accept people and you got to accept their flaws and their imperfections. If you say to yourself, I'm only going to love someone who is perfect. I'm only going to be friends with someone who is perfect. I'm going to only speak to those who are perfect. Guess what? You're going to be lonely. And when you walked in church this morning, you might have walked in thinking that you're perfect. I don't want to burst your bubble, but guess what? You're not. I'm not. Every human being isn't. There's a lot of good in all of us, more good than imperfection and flaw, but we all still have something. And sometimes we allow that something to surface and cover over our good. That's what happens often in a church. That's what happens often in every society, every organization. Sometimes the flaw becomes seen and noticed. But at the same time, sometimes our flaws are imperfections that give us our beauty. There was this little boy. His grandma took him to the amusement park. Oh, he was having a great time at the amusement park, riding one ride after another. They're down in Kittyland, and little boy's riding all these rides, and he gets in line for another ride. He's really excited for this ride. Now, the little boy, his face was peppered with freckles. These two little girls get in line, standing right behind this little boy, and they look at him. They start to point, they start to giggle. And he knows, because he can hear them, they're making fun out of his freckles on his face. He's feeling pretty bad. He sees his grandma. She's standing about 20 feet away. He couldn't take it anymore. They're making fun out of his freckles. So he leaves the line. He's running over to Grandma and keeps screaming, "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma." He's crying. Grandma bends down and she kneels on the ground and she opens up her arms. Little boy runs right into the loving arms of Grandma. Grandma gives him a big hug and squeeze and begins to wipe those tears coming out of his eyes and rolling down his cheeks. Those tears are big enough to flood a river. And Grandma said to her grandson, what's wrong? What happened? He said, "Grandma, you see those girls over there? They're making fun out of my freckles." And Grandma looked at her grandson and gave him a big hug and kiss, and she said, "Oh, no. Every freckle God put on your face, He put in just the right spot. Your freckles are beautiful. There's nothing more beautiful on the face of this earth than your freckles." And with love in his eyes, he looked at his grandma and said, "Grandma, there is something more beautiful than freckles on my face." And she said, "What?" And he looked at her and he said, "Grandma, your wrinkles." When he looked at Grandma and he saw that face, he said to himself, "There's not a more beautiful face than the face of this earth. Wrinkles and all, that's what makes you, Grandma, those wrinkles." Now, maybe Grandma didn't like her wrinkles. Now, maybe she spent many hours in the mirror with her finger trying to pull back her skin to eliminate those wrinkles. But what made her beautiful in the eyes of her little grandson? Her face, which included those wrinkles. Often it is our imperfections that make us beautiful, that give us character. That is the challenge of today's gospel reading. Jesus wanted a perfect, loving, compassionate church. But he realized, I have to have human beings run it. I can't get a kangaroo or giraffe or an elephant to run my church. I need to use human beings. And since I have to use people, my church will be able to do a lot of good. But it's going to have a quagmire of problems as it travels through the years. But he chose people anyway. And he loved people so much, he gave us the opportunity many times to deal with our imperfections by going to the cross and saying to Jesus, "I allowed my imperfection to bother me to the point where I made a mistake." Think about right now as you're sitting in this church, think about the problems you have right now in your life, or someone you love, what their problem might be. The vast majority of problems that we deal with are problems caused by our imperfection. Their propensity to drink or to take drugs or something else. That's our imperfection. That's our flaw. That's our own fault. Typically, we're the author of our own problems. This is the powerful gospel reading this morning because Jesus is picking people despite their imperfections. He's going to love them anyway. That's the challenge for all of us. It's important to accept those in your family just as they are, imperfection and all. It's important to accept everyone with their imperfections, their flaws, their freckles, and their wrinkles.